I was studying the game of Fischer, Keres, a 1959 game. I think it was in March. And I came across in that game a bishop and two pawns versus bishop endgame. And at some point, Keres resigned. And I looked at the position and I said, well, I don't understand why he resigned. And I don't understand much about bishop and pawn endgames, bishop and pawn versus bishop endgames either. So in doing research, I came across this position, which you see now. This is known as a Centurini position, or it's at least one of them. Luigi Centurini lived in the 1800s, and he published a number of endgame studies, this particular one in 1847. It is still of theoretical value today, and it occurs in many endgame books. For example, I have one here. This is Chess School 4. This is the Manual of Chess Endgames. It's published by Russian Chess House, and it is position number 140. By the way, this is 600 exact positions. What's an exact position? Well, it's one that doesn't require judgment or planning. You either know the position or you don't. As we might say, it's a matter of technique. Well, this position by Centurini is one of those that's a matter of technique. What does white want in this position? Well, obviously to promote the pawn. And what does black want? Obviously to prevent that. And black is willing to sacrifice his bishop for a pawn because a resulting king and bishop versus king endgame, that's a draw. You will notice then that black has two defensive assets, if you will. Number one is controlling this diagonal right here. And number two, this king is controlling the c7 square. The black king also, as we'll find out, needs to control the a7 square. And so sometimes he has to come over here and control a7. But he seems to be able to do that, as we will find out. So what does white then need to do? Well, a typical strategy for white is to place their bishop on the diagonal and to control it, and therefore promote the pawn. Of course, in this case, white cannot move his bishop to c7 because it will just get taken. That's part of the reason why the king is on c6, to allow that to happen. Okay, so white says, but if my bishop were on b8, then I would be able to stand on this diagonal and drive the bishop away and promote my pawn. At least that's the strategy. So white conceives of a plan. He's going to move his bishop here, and then here, and then here, gaining access to a7, and finally onto the b8 square, controlling the diagonal. Well, it sounds like a plan. Let's go ahead and do it. So the bishop goes to h4. Black, being ever observant, moves his king to b5. Where's he going? Well, he's going to a6, so he can guard the a7 square. White plays his bishop to f2, trying to gain access to a7, and black stops him. Okay, white's looking at this position, and maybe he says to himself, well, I don't know what to do exactly, but he does notice one thing, that this king right here is stuck. It cannot move. Why? Because it must stay there as long as the white bishop is on the g1 to a7 diagonal. And therefore, black must move the bishop somewhere. So white says, you know what? I'm just going to sit on this diagonal. Now, I'm going to make a move that is not optimal, but it is good because it will teach us something. The black comes to d4. And so the white bishop comes to d4. And so now black says, well, I've got to put my bishop somewhere. I'm going to move my bishop to d6. Okay. Well, you know what? Since the king is over here guarding a7, white maybe thinks to himself, I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to try to re-implement my plan of putting the bishop on c7. So here we go. Black, seeing all of this, moves his king to b6. Then the bishop comes back to d8, and now the king comes on to c6. So we see how black is defending both c7 and a7 with the king. But white says to himself, well, this doesn't seem to work. I don't seem to be able to get control of this important diagonal. And then white remembers, hey, wait a minute. I don't have to get my bishop onto this diagonal if I can distract the bishop off of it. Well, what does that mean? Well, for example, if I move my bishop here to e7, perhaps the bishop will take me. In that case, I'll be able to push my pawn, promote it to a queen, and yeah, a king and queen versus a king and bishop is an easily won endgame. The trouble is that black is not going to do it. So white's looking at this position and says, you know, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. And then white notices something. He says, you know, if I could move my bishop right here, right now, then this king would move to b5 and would be too late to stop me from getting on to a7. Well, of course, I can't move my bishop to c5 because the king will simply take it. Well, why is my bishop on e7? White begins to think to himself, and so he begins to review the moves, and he moves them back, and he says, "Oh, I was trying to distract the bishop on d6." Well, why is the bishop on d6? The black bishop, why is it on d6? And then white remembers, oh, let me just back up here. That's right, I remember. Here we were. I was trying to get my bishop onto a7, and then the king moved to a6, and then I didn't know what to do, so I played my bishop to d4, and then the bishop went to d6. Well, what if instead I played my bishop to c5? Then the black bishop wouldn't be able to come on to d6. So let's see what would happen. So, okay, I'm going to do that. And then let's say the bishop goes to e5. Says, fine, I'm going to attempt to get onto the c7 square. Oh, no, the king has come just in time. But now I'm going to try to distract the black bishop. He says, no, thank you. And look, I can move on to the diagonal, the g1 to a7 diagonal. I can move there before the king has an opportunity to get over to a7. Aha! So that strategy has worked. Now, let's say the king goes to a6, because we're not done. White still cannot promote the pawn. The bishop is still on the h2 to b8 diagonal, but now the bishop comes on to b8. The black bishop has to leave the diagonal, and so he moves to g1. Well, now what? Still can't promote the pawn, white thinks to himself, because my bishop is in front of my pawn. Okay, fine. Move my bishop. Where? Oh, I don't know. How about g3? And then black, thinking he has held the draw, moves to a7. The bishop is still attacking the b8 square. And then white again remembers the distraction strategy. And so he plays bishop f2. Black has nothing better than he can do than take the bishop on f2. Obviously, the bishop cannot move to b8. The white king will just take. So the black bishop takes, and the pawn promotes. This is an easily won endgame. Well, that is the Centurini position in which white needed to gain a tempo in order to take control of the diagonal, and then used the strategy of distraction to promote the pawn. I hope you found this enjoyable, and if so, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. We'll see you later. Bye.